Sekeres Price for Monday, June 24th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. If you're looking for your next meeting space, contact the Wall for all your event needs. Sales at wallcenter.com. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grace Sass, hitting switches, conducting things. Huge show coming up, all brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
And Applewood Nissan in Richmond has the 2024 Pathfinders in stock. Lease or finance them from just 2.49%. It's the legendary Pathfinder. Go take one for a test drive. You'll jump right back to where you dreamed you would be when you were Matt Sekeres and 20 years old, thinking about Pathfinders. It's all good at Applewood.
Mm-hmm. I've long eyed the Pathfinder. Poll question today. Tonight's Game 7, the biggest NHL game ever? Yes or no? You can vote at Sekeres Price on Twitter or X or YouTube. A lot of chit chat out there.
Mm-hmm.
And real, I voted yes. And to those who would say, oh, no, how could it be the biggest NHL game ever? Name a bigger one.
Well, I said no. And
can you name a bigger one?
I would say you go back to the Stanley Cups of the other superstar players. A Game 7 between the Wayne Gretzky-led Edmonton Oilers against the Broad Street bully Philadelphia Flyers.
They weren't quite the bullies at that point, but yes, fine.
But we're arm's length from the Broad Street bullies. Yep. Or the first ever Stanley Cup title for one Sidney Crosby.
Mm-hmm.
In his Game 7 win over an original 6 Detroit Red Wings team, still chock full of Hall of Fame veterans as well.
Yep. Those two popped to mind for me, as did 94, the Canucks Rangers.
And even if you want to go to something a little bit more recent, the Blues' first ever Stanley Cup championship against the Boston Bruins, 2 hockey markets toe-to-toe, and in a Blues comeback for the ages in terms of midseason to hoisting the chalice. Historic depths to the top of the league. This is, after all, the Florida Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
We can't put them into the biggest game of NHL history.
Well, except this would be the biggest collapse in NHL Stanley Cup final history.
And
none of the series you mentioned featured a 3-buzz comeback.
No, it has eccentricity to it. It has history attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't put it at the pinnacle of the mountain.
It's got, of course, the 31-year Canadian drought as a subplot.
Yeah. I think as we know,
and it's got the best player in the world about to forge this comeback, right?
Now, we know the Canadians don't have a Canadian team across the country that represent. But do Canadians care about the drought? Because I don't think you can have one without the other.
Good question. I mean, certainly the drought gets mentioned when I go about talking hockey.
And yet nobody wants anybody but their own team to end it.
Mm-hmm.
So do you really care? You just care about your own team's drought.
Well, again, I think it's a subplot. I voted yes because of the unique factor of the 0-3 comeback. Potentially the biggest comeback outside of the 42 Leafs. And let's face it, that's the pre-television age. One of the biggest collapse, the best player in the world. So, yeah, like I go through the other Game 7s that immediately sprung to mind. And folks, we're talking from a national level here. We fully understand if you're a fan of a certain team, needless to say, the Vancouver Canucks, then 2011 and 94 were bigger Game 7s for you than this one is. But put your league cap on. And both of those Game 7s, I think, stood tall because I think both series are amongst the most memorable in Stanley Cup finals.
They really are, yeah.
History. Look, the 94, that had a lot of layers, right? It had a 3-1 comeback, not a 3-buzz, but a 3-1 comeback from the Vancouver Canucks. It had an iconic original 6 franchise on a 54-year Stanley Cup drought. It had one of the best players in the world, or a couple of the best players in the world at the time, in Pavel Bure and Mark Messier. It had Madison Square Garden as its theater, as opposed to the arena down
by coastal
Florida.
East versus West.
Yeah, I mean, Do coasts matter?
It's
always going to be East versus West to some degree.
No, but like Colorado versus
Florida.
Nashville doesn't feel like, or Colorado versus Detroit even doesn't feel like it's East versus West.
Okay. See, but I found myself looking back and asking this question: how much difference was there between the '94 Canucks and the '24 Panthers? At the time, Vancouver was a quarter century into its NHL existence, had one Cinderella run to the final, got promptly swept, really weren't a going concern, had played before sparse crowds. It's not too dissimilar than the Florida team today that has been to one Cup final, Cinderella run, got promptly swept, has played before sparse crowds, a little older right now than the Canucks were in '94.
There's one difference, Matt, and it's
Canada and people who care in the market.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a stark difference.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, hockey is the biggest sport here. It's not the biggest sport in.
There's 31,000 Panthers fans thereabouts that care about what happens tonight.
Now, the '87 one was huge. You're quite right. A Philadelphia team behind the star goaltending and irrational behavior of Ron Hextall.
Yes.
Against the Edmonton
Ron
Oilers.
Hextall might have killed Wayne Gretzky. That was a legitimate concern.
That one had a lot going for it.
Yeah.
I can remember kids in the schoolyard decamping in that one, whether you were an Oilers
for sure
or a Flyers fan, no doubt. The '94 series also was sublime hockey, right? I mean, the games were just fantastic. We should
good old school hockey.
We should shout that. We should shout that as well. Yeah, I'm not really with you on the Bruins and Blues. That one, for whatever reason, didn't really.
Gloria? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean,
that's a good hockey market. Those are two good hockey markets.
Yeah.
Going to a game 7, as I said, remember the Blues were in last place in January.
Yeah.
And they win the Cup.
You mentioned Gloria. I just have Brett Hall in my head now.
Butchering.
But Sidney Crosby went in a game 7.
Crosby in '09, that was big time. Of course, second year in a row, those teams met for the Cup.
So there was that storyline too.
And and of course, we're talking about this one on the way in, not the way out, but it was dramatic towards the end, of course.
A rising Penguins franchise, a dying off Wings franchise.
Yep. Carolina, Edmonton, Calgary, Tampa. Tampa was a decent series. Don't get me wrong, but
if you were in those markets, you probably enjoyed that series, but it didn't capture the greater.
Sure. Well, I mean, Calgary, Tampa, we knew we were going into a lockout, and Edmonton, Carolina, we had come out of the lockout. So if you had a bad taste in your mouth around Gary Bettman and the NHL around those two series, you're not alone.
It was Fernando Pisani versus Cam Ward. It was tough to get up for that.
Yeah, I mean, Devils, Ducks, Shigear had been terrific, but again, we're talking dead puck era. The games for me weren't quite as much fun. Colorado, New Jersey played a game 7, but as we sit here, I guess Ray Bourque.
Well, let's bring
the headline there.
Let's bring this up then. Paul Paduti from Adjusted Hockey.
Mm-hmm.
When inclusive of Wayne Gretzky's reign, from the beginning of Wayne Gretzky's reign to now, all of the truly generational players, not to get into that debate again about what makes a generation, but the superstars from there to, we're talking Lemieux, Yager, he put Kane in there, Ovechkin, Crosby, David, and I'll put McKinnon in there too. I'll add McKinnon where Paduti didn't. There's been 2 game 7s for that group of players in the Stanley Cup final.
Really?
2.
And since Gretzky, you say?
Inclusive of Gretzky's years.
Oh, okay.
He won
87 Gretzky and it's 09 Sydney?
Yeah.
Oh.
And do you know what the performance was of the superstars in that?
Wow.
Gretzky had an assist. And Crosby, pointless. He left the game halfway through.
2-1 game, yeah.
And he had to leave. He didn't play the back half of the game. He was injured.
Oh, wow.
They both got their wins. but neither was it on the stat sheet, at least, a factor in their true superstar definition.
Good question from Chayton here on our replies to the poll question on Twitter. Is this game got a chance to break the record for viewership that the Canucks and Bruins Game 7 has?
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of cord cutting since then, but I mean, I don't know anybody who isn't watching the game tonight.
Yeah, because even if you're a casual hockey fan that wasn't invested from games 4 or 5 and even game 6,
right?
I wonder if they've just been pulled in by the history of it all here.
Now, it is 9 days later in June. Remember, it was June 15th for the Canucks. It's June 24th here. And, you know, we've heard the grumbling, and we discussed it last week about this might finally be the never-ending NHL season that gets the right people on board in terms of having to move up the schedule and having to get the season in a little in faster time. I mean, you know, whoever wins tonight, their executive team has maybe 24 hours to enjoy the cup before they're on to the off season. And like we talked about, you could potentially have a trade of a player before the parade because of how closely clustered the NHL offseason is to the tail end of this Game 7 Stanley Cup series. But let's get to our top story by Douglas. And it is Game 7, an improbable Game 7 over only the 42 Leafs have come back from down 3-0 to win the Stanley Cup. It's only happened a handful in times in Stanley Cup playoff history all time, regardless of round. And here it is with the Edmonton Oilers and Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on the verge of history. At 3-0, I tweeted out, what a horrible spring. Both the NHL and NBA playoffs, no drama, millions tuning out. Well, they've tuned back in.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Stanley Cup final if you've gone away at any point over the last 2 weeks. And I know many of you went away over the last 2 weeks. And frankly, many of you went away even before the start of this.
Well, that'll be the interesting thing is the overall series numbers. Compare that against other games, 7-game Stanley Cup finals. Because as much as this game might do super well, I don't know that you'll get it for the series because only diehards were watching Game 4 or 5. That chased away a lot of people in Game 4 and 5.
Yeah.
So I wonder how it'll
say
stack
this,
up.
Play golf at Northlands Friday. Came back and stopped at my friend's establishment in Kits to watch the end of the game on Friday. Blake, it was absolutely packed and everybody was watching.
Matt, I've already been chronicling this. I've been working in the States a couple of times here during the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Like restaurants and bars have done pretty well here Friday, Monday, I think.
I've been amazed at what I've seen in the States in terms of interest in the Stanley Cup final. So we watched Game 6, Paul Dolan and I did, down in Portland, sports bar in downtown, and not even in like the, you know, almost all of Portland looks like Kits.
In the Keep Portland weird part of Portland?
Yeah, and like the pubby,
the artsy
pubby. We weren't there. We were
the
downtown.
Bohemian part,
right? We were downtown, a pretty run-of-the-mill sports bar. Matt, it was on 80% of the televisions. It was a big sports bar. The game was on 80. It was on the big screen, and there was a hockey-dedicated crowd of about 20 watching right in front of the big screen with Oiler jerseys on. Oiler jerseys on in Portland. It's probably been a pretty good year for the NHL.
You know why that is in part ESPN.
Yep.
When you're on ESPN, you get into the daily discussion on their morning programs.
You get a baptism.
The Greeny program, the First Take, and then the afternoon debate shows.
Yep.
When your rights are not on ESPN, you have to do something like get to this point to get any kind of recognition, acknowledgement. But ESPN, with the commercial interest in the National Hockey League now, can push these sorts of side debates, subplots that you just weren't getting when you weren't on ESPN and only on NBC.
Yeah.
So as for this evening, either Roberto Luongo or Troy Stetcher is going to lift the Stanley Cup. Either Evander Kane or West Van's Sam Reinhart is going to lift the Stanley Cup. Don't suspect Evander Kane is going to play. We are 13 years to the day since Burnaby's Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was the first overall pick of the Edmonton Oilers. He missed the playoffs for 5 consecutive seasons and 7 of his first 8 there in Edmonton. In fact, he would be a very good candidate to take the cup first, I think, from Connor McDavid, as someone who has been there from the jump, suffering the misery. That was, although the misery predates Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, but of the players who are remaining on the Oilers, nobody has been through the misery of the Nuge. Only the 09 Penguins and the 19 St. Louis Blues have won the cup with a negative goal differential. Florida is almost certain to have a negative goal differential here. They are -6 in this series. Edmonton +6, so that sign points to Edmonton. And I've seen people draw some parallels to the 2011 Cup, the Bruins and the Canucks, in that all of the Edmonton wins have been big margins and lots of goals. They've won 8-1, 5-3, 5-1 here in the series. And the Florida wins haven't been quite as narrow as the Canucks wins in that series, but you have a little bit of that going on. It hasn't quite been the same home road split as that series, as we know, but when Florida has won, they have won closer games, and in some cases, like game 1, where you were not the better hockey team, you just out goaltended the other guys. The Edmonton wins have been with a whole lot of pomp and circumstance.
The other parallel is goaltending and Conn Smythe. Because as crazy as it sounds now, even to say it, but it was true at the time. If Roberto Luongo posts a shutout in game number 7, despite the boatloads of trouble he had winning in Boston, he had a very good case to be the Conn Smythe winner.
Yep.
Buoyed by his performance in the Stanley Cup final, because ultimately it matters what you do in the wins. Who cares what you did in the losses? Unlike in the regular season, you need to post 16 wins. How you get there, I mean, that how many losses you take along the way, it's immaterial. The losses don't matter. Just the 16 wins. And how big a role did you play in those 16 wins? And if Sergei Bobrovsky posts a shutout, let's say in tonight's game, or a Mona Lisa of a 1-goal effort, look at his numbers in the 4 wins in the Stanley Cup final, and you could make the argument they don't win the Stanley Cup final without him.
And that's fair, but he's not going to win the trophy. McDavid's going to win the trophy winner.
No, you think?
He's got a 10-point margin scoring-wise.
Oh, I don't know.
I mean, he's not going to pass Gretzky's record. We talked about that on Friday. He needed 2 monster games, 2 very healthy games to do that. And I mean, barring 6 points tonight, 5 points tonight, that'll be that. But
if he goes, what did he have, 1 point the other night?
Yeah.
If he has 1 point in the final 2 games and they lose the Stanley Cup final, you're going to give him the Conn Smythe?
Actually, he didn't have a point on.
He didn't have any points?
No.
So if he goes pointless in the final 2 games and they don't win the Stanley Cup, I don't know. I don't know when they do the voting on the 7-game series. Do they do it after 2 periods or what?
Yeah, it's after 2 periods.
After 2 periods of game 7.
Well, it's usually the 3rd period. Yeah,
we'll see.
But he's 10 points better than Evan Bouchard in National Hockey League postseason scoring, 42 points, playing nearly 23 minutes a night, and just knowing the way hockey reporters vote, I think it's going to be Connor McDavid.
See, that for that very reason, I'm saying the opposite. Knowing how hockey reporters vote, and that we can count on one hand and have room of the number of times that a losing player has won the Conn Smythe, I would say it doesn't happen.
Yeah, but I think you can look at McDavid in this postseason run and compare it to Sekeres with Anaheim, and compare it to, it was Hextall, the other one, right? With the Flyers.
Yeah.
But not a goalie, but a guy who single-handedly above and beyond. Because let's remember, everybody, Leon Draisaitl hasn't been. He was great in the first round. He has been an all-time postseason performer. He got hurt against the Canucks. His back injury flared up.
Yeah.
And he really hasn't been the same guy since. So I think you can make that case as well. When you're talking about Connor McDavid's candidacy, it's because he hasn't really had the running mate that he's accustomed to having. I mean,
not as dominant anyway.
No. Draisaitl he's got 3 points in 6 games here, all assists in the Stanley Cup final. And he wasn't exactly a world beater against Dallas either. It was a 5-point series against Dallas in 6 games.
And Evander Kane, a non-factor.
Right. Like, has been going through injury. So take a look at the guys that McDavid is now dragging and without the supporting cast that he's accustomed to having. So I think it's going to be McDavid win or lose. What do you think, Grady? You think there's an outside shot that somebody?
No, I think it's McDavid. Yeah. Betting odds reflect that too. Not that that's the end all be all, but
Let's see what Game 7 gives us.
Yeah.
And that's the top story brought to you by Douglas Mattresses. Experience the industry's leading risk-free trial. It's a 365-night risk-free trial, folks. You don't like it, you get a full refund. And then they donate your mattress to charity. So you really can't lose here. It's been named Canada's best mattress in Canadian living. And right now, if you go to douglas.ca/Canucks Army, you get a fabulous deal, a free comfort sleep bundle, gift pack full of sheets and pillows and all that sort of stuff. So go check it out. Again, it's douglas.ca/Canucks Army.
As for the Vancouver Canucks, this could be a very big week for them, both on the ice, both at the award show and in the boardroom. I'm going to say on the ice, off the ice, but they're not on the ice. Anticipate that Quinn Hughes is going to win the Norris Trophy for the National Hockey League's Outstanding Defenseman, season 23-24, Thursday at the award show. And yes, there is an award show before the draft gets going on Friday at the first round, and then draft continues on Saturday, free agency Monday. Question for you. If for whatever reason, and I guess the reason would just be kind of laziness, checking the box for Cale Makar because he's been the best defenseman in the NHL, and will likely win a lot more Norris trophies, but there's a little sliver of me that wonders how much Cale Makar got votes just reflexively from voters who are accustomed to voting for him at the top of the Norris ballot. If for whatever reason Cale Makar came away with the award, Blake, do you think it would be such a slight, such an injustice that the Vancouver Canucks and Quinn Hughes could use it as off-season fuel, next season fuel?
I mean, we've talked about the manufactured slights of athletes a ton. So, potentially. I don't know that you lean on it and be like, they're going to the Cup final because he didn't win the Norris. But you use whatever fuel you can to get up for a game, to get up for a season. So, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the Vancouver Canucks, this is my prognosis here. I bet you they don't get a whole lot of preseason love next year. And I say this without knowing what they've done in the offseason. Even if they got a Guentzel, I bet you they don't get a lot of preseason love.
Yep.
And I bet you they're going to use that more than anything else of we're being picked to be 3rd or 4th in the Pacific Division after 109 points.
No, they get used to it now. Everybody's going to have Edmonton to win the Pacific next year.
Yeah. People expect to bounce back from Vegas after a very lackluster season from them.
So you will see the Canucks predicted in 3rd, 4th place in the division. Hughes, franchise record this season. Single season points and assists by Canucks defenseman. He joined Henrik Sedin as only the 2nd Canucks player with 70 assists in a season in consecutive. Second player with 70 assists in consecutive. 2nd all-time points and assists by a Canucks defenseman. That's on the career rank, and led the National Hockey League in scoring by a defenseman. Should say 70 assists in a single season, not consecutive season. So all sorts of accolades, and we anticipate one more for the Canucks defenseman.
Yeah.
Friday, we figured they'll sit on their hands. They'll play some Tetris, Brick Breaker, what have you. At the
Try to
NHL draft.
reel that Mikheyev deal, I would guess. There's a pressure point there. If they can get somebody to take their third rounder this year, maybe they can get rid of Mikheyev.
The bigger question for me is Nikita Zadorov re-signed by Friday. Is he a Vancouver Canuck? Did they get that business done? Saravelli told us on Friday he thought the plan was get Roenick re-signed, leave enough, have enough left over to re-sign Zadorov, and then take your best crack at Jake Guentzel on July 1st.
I think they probably make a decision by Friday, yes. And I say that because, well, when it's silence, that's usually when the Canucks make noise, because rarely are there leaks immediately leading to the action that we think. That Roenick signing kind of came out of nowhere. I would suspect that the silence that we're hearing in those negotiations, it means nothing. But I think the Canucks by Friday will have a pretty, they're going to eventually just have to draw a line in the sand. So we can't afford to have a cap hit of X, Nikita. It's either this or nothing. They're going to get to that point. And so I think they probably will know within their own minds, even though it's not the deadline, whether or not Nikita Zadorov is going to be a Canuck by Friday.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Because they got to move on with formulating plan B.
Exactly.
So
that's exactly it. And a name has emerged here amongst the plan Bs if they don't re-sign, if they don't land Jake Guentzel in free agency. And that would be Dollywall saying there is interest in Tyler Toffoli, the ex-Vancouver Canuck, who we have talked about as one of those next tier wingers amongst the free agent crop. Now, I got to say, there's part of me that's a little bit surprised just because, well, Alvin talked about getting faster.
Yeah, that's the worry.
He doesn't get you faster. 32 years old. I mean, he put up 33 goals in 79 games last year. That's no slouch.
He just finds the soft spot.
I mean, he scored more goals than Jay Guentzel last year.
Did he really? Yeah.
Yeah, well, Guentzel had 30. Again, we're talking about Guentzel like he's a 30 goal scorer from last year. He's been 40 in the past, but this past season now 67 games for Guentzel.
Yeah, the high end goal score is actually
a little bit.
That's the actual high end goal score.
Well, or Stamkos, and Stamkos.
I mean, I like Toffoli. I just if you can just blink and put him into your lineup, that's great. But of course, he's going to want one more multi-year deal in his career.
Oh, for sure. AFP Analytics has Toffoli listed as a $6 million player over 4 years.
Like, you just cannot sign that deal.
I'm just not.
You just cannot sign that deal.
I think he's taking him to age, 36?
I think he could absolutely be good next year. I think he could probably be good the year after that. Yep. And that will, by good, I mean 24 to 32 goals. I think that's still possible for a couple of years. But then you're just dragging luggage. And that third and fourth year, the Canucks are still in their window. You can't have that luggage in years 3 and 4. Gotta be careful.
It's 33 and 34 goals the last 2 years. Like, those are his 2 best seasons from a strictly goal scoring point of view.
Yeah. And health was there for those 2 years.
He played 82 games last year. He played 79 this previous season.
And how many times did he come close to that in previous years?
He had a 31 goal campaign in 2015, 2016. He had a 28 goal campaign in 52 games his first year in Montreal. Remember,
that's the best rate. Yeah.
Remember we talked about how great he was after he went to Montreal?
Yeah.
Remember that was the thing for a few months. As, oh, look, Tyler Toffoli scored.
He was fleecing the Canucks in the Canadian division, right? Wasn't that?
I believe that was the case.
Didn't he have 6, 7, 8 goals versus the Canucks that year? It was just mean.
Like, oh, you're gonna not re-sign me? Huh? I'll show you.
I mean, again, it's not. It has nothing to do with the player. It just has to do with the contract that you're going to have to give the player. And I just don't think I would feel comfortable if I'm the Canucks doing that.
The Hockey Hall of Fame announces its 2024 induction class on Tuesday. Let me ask you, the Russian factor seems to be swirling here a little bit in terms of not exactly feeling most motivated to induct Russian players as the world sits where it sits with war in Russia or in Ukraine on account of Russia. I think Datsuk is undeniable.
Yeah, and I don't know that I follow the logical path of not feting Pavel Datsuk because of Russia invading. I mean, Pavel Datsuk is not out there right now supporting Vladimir Putin publicly, is he?
I don't know.
I don't think he is. I haven't read any stories on that. This is from a time and that war was not going on. You know, if he had him as an Instagram picture, you'd have a case to bring that up. But in lieu of that,
so it's not going to be. So if it's not held against Pavel Datsuk, how about a feather in the cap of defector Alex McGillney and former Vancouver Canuck, who left the Soviet Union
right
all those years ago? Is this the year that
good timing for that?
Well, is this the year that McGillney gets in?
Yeah. I mean, depends on how crowded it is. It's pretty good class.
Sicamouse's Shea Weber, a candidate. He could very well hear his name called. Patrick Marleau, the all-time Ironman, is up for induction, and we'll see if he gets it. I'd be surprised if he's a first-time guy, but, you know, there very well may be people who look upon it as our famous Take 5 argument all those years ago, the best stability availability, and this guy's been more available for a longer period of time than any hockey player ever.
I think he eventually gets in, but it's not going to be this year.
I would agree. But they do like the bigger classes, the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah, right? they've got four slots that they can fill. I don't think people get upset with the candidates that can fill the 4 slots this year. They'll find their way.
So we'll be looking at that in what will be a very busy news week here for hockey. We often talk about this. This has been in the week in the past, Blake, where we've had like new franchises unveiled, expansion drafts, right? Schedule releases.
Yeah, schedule should be coming this week too.
The NHL just loves to just omnibus everything, put it all in the same week, as opposed to sparsing out their news and announce. It's not the NFL model. The NFL now wants to be more relevant in more months
12
of the
months
year.
Of the year, yeah.
And hockey just seemingly hasn't.
June 27th was the schedule last year. Like, when are they going to wedge the schedule into all these days?
It is also rumor season, as you start to hear who free agents are connected with and potentially some trades that are coming down the pipeline. Now, this qualifies as more than rumor. Rutger McGroarty, a first-round pick of the Winnipeg Jets, a American forward, has apparently told them, if you can't guarantee me a spot on your hockey club for next season, then I'm not signing with you. University of Michigan product, the 14th overall pick in 2022. He had a monster season for the Wolverines, 52 points, 36 games. But his name is now out there as a trade chip for the Jets. And really, there's been a number of U.S.-born players here, U.S.-groomed players, Cutter Gauthier, another one, who have tried to steer their career in certain places.
Yeah,
right?
And not necessarily just because it's a Canadian team, because Gauthier wasn't
signing with the Flyers,
and
found himself traded to the
Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah,
a legendary team
as U.S. franchises go, but of course they're not very good right now. And in fact, the Flyers are a team that we are told could well be active. They have cap issues in Philadelphia. They're trying to get rid of players. There's a rumored Senators Flyers deal that could take place involving
Don Waddell said their first pick is up for grabs. Like,
Mishkov's coming over to Philly.
Yeah, Mitchkov is coming over to Philly. There's rumors about a Linus Ullmark to Ottawa deal in the same division potentially. There, Jacob Chychrun, most available from the Senators. We're hearing Brett Pesce connected with the New Jersey Devils in free agency. If that's the case, then is John Marino back on the block? And of course, we've had the conversation about John Marino, right? Defenseman who's got Pittsburgh roots with the Rutherford Alvin management group. So all of those sorts of rumors, reports are going to really pick up, and perhaps as soon as this evening after the game ends.
Maybe.
Like, I think we have a trade tomorrow, one way or the other, Blake. I think there's probably a trade or two waiting just for the Cup final to end, and then they're going to pull the trigger and make the announcement.
Well, you've been banning about, does a player get traded before the deadline or before the parade, even like how quick? And the only way that would be,
a player from the winning team,
from even the Stanley Cup final team, like the loser as well. Been trying to see a candidate like a Sam Bennett or a Carter Verhaeghe.
Right. Yeah. Well,
no, they got your left. They got your left.
Well, Verhaeghe's really struggled here in the final.
Right. So if somebody was willing to pull the trigger on that, Florida,
I don't think it's going to be Bennett. He's
been too much of a hero.
Yeah.
But for him,
they have some issues.
They got 20 mil of cap space, but they've got
a ton of UFAs.
7 forwards signed for next year.
Wow. So one way or the other, win or lose tonight, Bill Zito is a very busy man.
And of course, Montour as a UFA,
right.
If they want to bring him back.
Oh, yeah.
On top of Reinhart.
And on top of Reinhart.
On top of OEL.
yes, on top of OEL. Yeah, we'll see.
So anyways, bottom line, there's going to be a lot of news coming here.
Mm-hmm.
Across the National Hockey League, and speak for Blake and Grady, we're here for it. Can't wait.
Honestly, we've had a good pace to the offseason already.
We have.
And now we're inside 7 days to free agency. It's amazing.
Canada Day, July 1st, starting at 8 a.m. Pacific. You can tune in to the Daily Face-Off Live free agency special. Frank Cervelli, Tyler Yaremchuk, NHL former NHLers Carter Hutton, Colby Cohen. We're going to be going on Canada Day next Monday and the first day of free agency as well. We also have been telling you about the Daily Face-Offs Parlay Challenge. Tonight is your last opportunity to sign up and win. Nightly winners get gift cards. Sure, we got some round winners or people in the hunt who are looking forward to the cash. Blake's been playing for us.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it serves as a prediction, right? So you're effectively giving us your Game 7 prediction here, Mr. Price, on the prop menu from the Daily Face-Offs Parlay Challenge. What are we looking at? Who do we like?
I have been going down this road for some time now, and I'm in for a penny, so I'm in for a pound. And the reason why I'm going down this road, folks, is really hard to do what the Oilers are trying to do. 4 games in a row. Home ice is in Florida's side right now. I think Florida finds a way.
That would be, that would snap. I'm just looking at here from Big Head Hockey. Poor Roberto Luongo is 0-5. In Stanley Cup clinching scenarios. His teams have been outscored 27-7.
Oh.
Yeah, he has no agency over these ones. But he still rides the roller coaster to some degree, so I'll give him that.
Although I must say, he's relatively calm every time they take the shot of the executive box in Florida. I mean, Zito's throwing water bottles and everything.
Yeah.
Louis looks reasonably, because we know he's emotive, Louis.
He's been through it. He knows it.
And
so I'm going Florida.
And he's not playing, and in his mind, he's down there on the ice.
I'm going Florida. I think both teams are pretty nervous and lock it down. I don't think it's as freewheeling as we've seen. So I'm taking the under 5.5. First goal I'm giving to Florida. Highest scoring period, the first. Barkov on the over for 1 assist. Hyman on the under for goals. McDavid, I'll give him. McDavid is getting 2 points tonight. So I've got him on the over. That's the one positive Oiler thing I've got. Reinhart's been struggling. I don't think Reinhart gets a goal. I've got it Reinhart on the under. And if I do, it does go to tiebreaker.
So are you thinking goals tonight or not?
No, I got things on the under 5.5 goals.
So, but you got McDavid on 2 points.
Yeah.
So you got at least 2 goals for the Oilers.
Yeah. So it's a 3-2 game.
So you're thinking 3-2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And total shots 44. I have it as a low one. And again, that's 2 factors. I think it's a tight game and the way that they're policing the shots on goal thing. 44 shots.
Policing the shots on goal.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
And what he means by that is that teams are looking for quality over quantity. And for some reason, the people counting shots in the building don't seem to be very liberal.
No, that was going wide. Get out of town. You got the vectors out there. That was going wide, so it's not a shot on goal.
Started the first game of the first playoff period. The Vancouver Canucks, I think they finished the period with like 5 shots, and we're looking at them.
They were peppering.
It seemed like there was more than that.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be a shot and a rebound, and they count one shot.
I would sit in here with Jacob and Mike and the rink-wide crew, and we'd be like, okay, let's count them up. We can remember 6. Like, how is there only 5 on the board?
Anyhow.
Well, actually.
Yes. That one was going wide. That one was going wide. Don't question it.
It hit the defenseman's skate before the shot.
Let's get to today's menu, brought to you by Greta Bar. Fantastic spot to watch the game. Hey, just saying. There's one tonight. Quick walk to the Rinker Stadium. Go-to spot for food, drinks, fun before, after the game. And games at BC Place this weekend, too. Plus that bitchin' arcade that everybody loves. Make it a game night at Greta 50 West Cordova or at gretabar.com. We'll be joined here in a moment by Jeff Paterson. Plenty of Canucks talk with him, but also talk about this Game 7 Stanley Cup final. Andrew Harris is going to join us, former British Columbia Lion running back, former Winnipeg Blue Bomber. He was honored Friday at the game in Winnipeg, his hometown, for an incredible career, a Hall of Fame career. He's also, and we've known this about Andrew for some time, he is quite active off the football field. He's a guy with lots of interests and lots of opportunities that he picks up. And one of the things that he's done is construct a documentary. It's called Running Back Relentless. It is released. It is out there. You can find it on Amazon and elsewhere. And he came in studio today to talk a little bit about the documentary, but about his career and what he's up to now, these days in post-football life.
Great chat.
So, yeah, awesome to see Andrew again, an incredible football. In fact, the type of football player who, because in the Canadian Football League, you look at it and say you win with your quarterbacks and your Canadians. So you're trying to find the most valuable Canadians. And Andrew was absolutely amongst the, if not the most valuable Canadian player in the league for many, many years there. But he was the type of guy where, you threw the birth certificate out. Like, that guy was a tremendous star running back regardless.
Well, and he
where he was born and grew up. He was a difference maker at a position where it's hard to be a difference maker these days.
He had better seasons along the ground in Winnipeg, but you go back and look at a couple of his Lion seasons, they used him way more as a not more than they did along the ground, but more than Winnipeg did in the air. He still had 1,800, 1,900 all-purpose yard seasons with the Lions.
And a complete running back, too. Run the ball, catch the ball, pass, protect. Remember, we reminisced about his first camp with the Lions when he made his mark on special teams, covering kicks and everything. No, he was a blood and guts, heart and soul player, made every team he played for better. So awesome seeing Andrew again. And he'll tell you about his new documentary. Okay, Bet365, our bets of the day. This segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partners of Sekeres Price. We're delighted to have them aboard. So I'm just going to go a bit of a different direction than Blake here. Maybe some food for thought.
Okay.
Because I do think Edmonton has Florida on the back heel. I do think the Bobrovsky clock has struck midnight here. There's no more glass slipper, and without stellar goaltending, I'm just not sure that Florida is up for the task. If you're picking Edmonton to win tonight, then you have to think they're going to score some goals, right? Again, they've scored 5, 5, and 8 in their 3 victories in this series. There's a first team to 4 goals prop, and maybe that's with an empty netter. But Edmonton, first team to 4, pays plus 275.
Okay. I'm looking ahead.
Do you think Edmonton can win a 2-1 game here tonight?
Yeah. I honestly, I've got zero pulse of this game. I have zero idea what this game will look like.
No, I know. And, debate whether, momentum or storylines continue on. I'm just going with what I've seen here. I think it was Brett Kulak I heard in an intermission interview on Friday talk about how they made the adjustment earlier in the series to take away the center of the ice from Florida, not allow them as much room as they were allowing them early in the series in the center of the ice. Plus, to be really heavy with a 2-person forecheck, but make sure the third forward is always back to defend. And it's worked, and it's created some opportunities for the Oilers, and it's really stifled the Florida offense. So that's just, I'm going to run with that.
That's the big game
until
today.
Proven us otherwise.
That's the big game today. The big game tomorrow is a Copa America, Canada versus Peru. Canada is the favorite in the game, which is nice to see.
Can I ask something?
Getting some respect, getting some betting respect at the very least.
I saw the puny crowd in San Francisco. I've seen some of the other crowds here that haven't been all that big.
They've smashed attendance records. Smashed them already.
Well, Canada, Argentina did, and the USA game did big crowds.
But others too. I think the Mexican game did well.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. The Mexican game. What are the chances this tournament's going to come back to North America if you can't pack every stadium for every game? Because that would be the case if held in South America.
Oh, I don't know about that.
You don't know?
No,
okay. I thought we were fighting up. I thought we were fighting against a sort of a cultural thing here where,
first of all, way smaller stadiums in South America. And secondarily, if you're going to have this expanded Copa, like how many American, Mexican, and Canadian fans are going down to support their teams in those countries? Well, I think it's far more likely that the Latin American teams travel up than the North American teams travel down.
Have they missed the boat here though by not playing Canada in closer to border towns, or are there just no border towns taking part here?
It's all southern. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's too bad because I'm sitting here thinking about it. Canada in Kansas City, like of all the places that are hard to access.
Yeah.
To access in the United States, like Kansas City would be amongst the biggest, right? How many direct flights are there to Kansas City? It's in the middle of the country. Nobody's driving down like
Denver.
No, exactly.
Seattle. Yeah.
So, not even a Chicago. Yeah.
I think the attendance is going to do fine. I don't think they're going to come back to it for another cycle.
Do we ever have a chance to host this tournament?
Yeah.
So
I would be a co-host. We wouldn't host it on our own.
Right.
But yeah, I think we got that chance.
Because complaints about the grass fields being laid over the turf fields, and I think you'll see more of it. When it's not the United States or Mexico, and it's in some of these cities that are harder to access, I'm not sure you're going to see great crowds.
But with our science now, those pallet turf fields
should be better, but it's not.
Way better.
But it's not. They're all bitching. They're all grumbling.
Yeah. Anyhow, back to the game. Jonathan David just flat out needs to score a goal.
He sure does.
So I think he was my pick in the opener. I'm going to go back to him today for the tomorrow game because he just needs to score. The guy, that is what his job is, and no one's finishing. It's on Jonathan David. If he's going to be a subject of all these transfer rumors, show us that you can compete at the highest level and get a goal, plus 275.
Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS when opening that account. Jeff Paterson coming up next. Northlands Golf Course. Download the free app and book tee times with a touch of your thumb. And while you're on course, open the app for hole-by-hole GPS and track your score. 6 to 90-day reservations. Jump the queue. Lock in your date for $10 per player booking fee. Limited daily availability. Check it all out. GolfNorthlands.com. Joined now by Rink-Wide Vancouver's Jeff Paterson, our Canucks reporter, as we head into what we anticipate will be a very, very busy week for the hockey club. Jeff, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. Yeah. I mean, end of the hockey season, but What a wild week ahead for the Vancouver Canucks. There's a lot to do here in a relatively short period of time, and that includes the draft, where they're going to be bystanders, we think, for the most part, but still that's going to take their attention when they've got this long to-do list. So lots to get after here in the next 7 days.
I envision Patrick Oveen just walking around like swinging like a watch on a chain and just trying to wheel and deal. Like he's got nothing to do. He doesn't have to go up on stage, so he's just going to be wheeling and dealing, isn't he? Isn't that right, Jeff?
Well, I don't know. He could use that first round to be negotiating contracts with agents and players, because he doesn't have to worry about making a first round selection as it stands right now. And I think the Philip Hronek extension sort of ended any speculation of the Canucks, playing a card to get back into the first round. I think they're going to be bystanders here for round one at the very least, and then they don't have a second rounder either. So going to be playing the waiting game for sure. Beyond that, what Patrick Allvin is able to accomplish in Vegas or before he gets to Vegas, I guess these next few days will tell us.
Do you think Nikita Zadorov gets re-signed this week?
Well, as I said to you last week, this parting, it hasn't taken place. Certainly nobody has thrown down and walked out entirely. And so as long as that possibility exists, I think there's a good chance that something gets done. Now, since you guys and I last did this, the whole idea of Ilya Mikheyev absolutely being in play and Dan Milstein having agency now to try to facilitate a deal, I think that indicates to you just how much the Vancouver Canucks want to free up additional cap space to make a few things happen internally. A Mikheyev deal can still take place at some point beyond free agency, but it won't give them whatever cap space they're able to free up to make some things happen here in the short term. So I think they're motivated. They'd love to move off Mikheyev. Again, and I know it's been discussed a lot in the market, is it a sweetener? Is it retention? Like, what's the best path forward here? And I'm not sure that there's a great answer for the Vancouver Canucks, but if they can swing some sort of deal there, I'm not closing the door on Nikita Zadorov re-signing with the Vancouver Canucks.
Puckpedia says a second-round pick. Jeff, would you part with a second-round pick to shed the Mikheyev salary?
If I could do it for the third rounder that they had this year, I would just punt on this year's draft. You've already parted with the first and second. Like, honestly, I would just say, see you next year, whatever next year's draft looks like. But I don't think a third rounder does it. So then it brings you back to, how much draft capital do you have at a time where you don't have a whole lot in the system? These are these crunchy decisions that this front office has to make. And I guess, I'm at the point now where, like, they're in win now mode. We know the state of the contracts of Thatcher Demko for 2 more years and Quinn Hughes for 3. That kind of feels like the window here, and you kind of have to just roll with it. You've put yourself in this position. You've come off a nice season. It does feel like now is the time for the Vancouver Canucks. And if it's a second rounder, I think you kind of hold your nose and make that deal. And obviously it's not this year's second rounder. So again, it's just kind of punting the prospect issue down the road a little bit. But if it's all about winning in the here and now, then you're sort of too far down that road now, I think, to turn back.
They show some restraint too. Remember all that talk about flipping Lindholm at the deadline to try to turn him into Guentzel. And, that probably would have cost a draft pick as well. In the end, by not completely going crazy at the trade deadline, they've got the draft capital that they might have spent there to spend now to create that cap space and maybe turn that cap space into Jake Guentzel and ultimately get him in the end as well. Are they in win now mode? Like, is it all chips in for this coming season? Or do you think that's still a couple of seasons away, which would ironically put them into that fatter OEL territory, obviously?
No, I think with what they did this year with 50 wins on 109 points and winning the regular season division and getting the fan base engaged and back on board, I think there's some pressure on this management group now. They were brought in to win championships. It wasn't to continue to try to build up things and accumulate pieces. It was all about delivering that one prize that has never been delivered to Vancouver in more than 50 years of existence now, and that's the Stanley Cup. And so, we all know that there is a core in place. That part's undeniable. It's now going about supporting that core, and they did a nice job last year in free agency, but this is the challenge for this management group, is to replicate what they were able to accomplish on July 1st last year there's no guarantees that you can do it year in and year out, a year after year. And to get a number of guys on short-term contracts that came in and played key supporting roles, now they've got to try and do it again. But they do have the coach of the year, and that's going to be a selling point. They've got a player like Quinn Hughes who's likely to win the Norris this week, and that's a selling point. So, I think it's a destination again. And so they've got money to spend. That's the other thing that we haven't seen the Canucks management group in a handful of years have money to play with. And the last group that had money to play with didn't spend it wisely. So I think this front office has built up, goodwill, benefit of the doubt on the part of the fan base, but they are going to try to have to pull rabbits out of a hat here for a second straight July 1st. And no, I think they're in win now mode. Absolutely. Again, 2 more years with Thatcher Demko at $5 million. Quinn Hughes on one of the best value contracts, as it turns out, in the National Hockey League. If those guys stick around and re-sign, their numbers are going through the roof, and that's going to take away any wriggle room that the Vancouver Canucks have, even as the cap escalates here. So these are challenges. These are decisions that this front office is facing here in the next week or so. Not the extensions on Demko and Hughes, but just how to support this group. And ultimately, it's not about running it back with last year's team, which was very good, but it's about getting better. And I think you have to keep in mind, too, guys, the parameters of what the Canucks are up against in, whether the Oilers win the Stanley Cup. They're coming back with another. They're the Oilers. They got McDavid and Draisaitl next year. That team's going to be a challenge. The Vegas Golden Knights, last year's Stanley Cup champs, they're not going to take lightly to getting punted in the first round. That they're always going to be aggressive. This Pacific Division is going to be difficult, and that's just the landscape of the life the Vancouver Canucks are in right now. So win now mode, yes, but certainly there are challenges that will face the Canucks next season.
Our first chance to talk to you since the Philip Hronek re-signing, and of course a very cheatery press availability. Jeff, what did you make of the events of last week with Philip Hronek?
I like the contract. I didn't love it, but the way the system is set up, he knew he was going to cash in as a 26-year-old right shot guy with arbitration rights coming off a 48-point season. He was going to get a massive raise. And now there was always the chatter in the market about $8 million. I'm not sure I ever fully bought into that. The fact that he didn't get $8 million, but finishes at 7.25, I don't know if that represents a victory for the Vancouver Canucks. It's just somewhere close to market value for a player of that type who had those arbitration rights. So, I wrote about it at Canucks Army. I think part of the equation here is he proved to be a really good, almost perfect partner for Quinn Hughes. And there is massive value in that Quinn Hughes on his own, we've seen, is a incredible hockey player, but Hughes helped Hronek, and Hronek helped Hughes get to 92 points in that Norris that he's probably going to get his hands on moving forward here. So I think that there's real value in that for the Vancouver Canucks. You keep your captain happy. You keep his wingman there with him. There's no reason to think that those two can't continue to be dominant as a pairing. Only 2 pairings in the National Hockey League played more than Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronek together last season. So they were used a lot in all situations. They rose above. They outscored opponents by close to 30 when they were on the ice at 5-on-5. And we're seeing this around the National Hockey League, whether it's Makar and Taves in Colorado right now with Bouchard and Ekholm, the way that they have played. You build up this sort of super pair and really try to make hay when they're on the ice, and then you hope that the rest of the group behind them on the defensive depth chart can hold their own at the very least, and that's kind of where the Canucks are right here, right now. So I was happy to see Hronek. Had some jokes on Zoom with the media as well. And why wouldn't he be happy? He just cashed in at $58 million, and his future is certain now for the next almost decade. So he seemed like he was in a pretty good mood, relaxed, and he talked about needing to get stronger so that he can be the same player in the second half in the playoffs that he was in the first half last season.
Should the Canucks go out and find a number 3 defenseman, a true one? Like, is Nikita Zadorov even a number 3 defenseman? Because behind that top 2 pair, Carson Soucy's not a number 3. And, there are a few defensemen available. Should that be a priority? Is Zadorov a number 3 in your mind?
Well, I think the way they utilized him in the playoffs, he kind of turned out to be that guy. But on a depth chart right now, I've got Quinn Hughes and Carson Soucy on my left side, and then you're probably trying to slot somebody in under those two. Now, when we just talked about Hughes and Hronek, as incredible as they are, Soucy and Myers together gave the Canucks what they were looking for in the playoffs, and that is these long, rangy guys that did an incredible job of keeping opponents, even McDavid and Draisaitl, to the outside for the most part. But the underlings were not kind to those two guys. Like, they got buried. They took on a ton of water. Ultimately, they didn't drown, but they don't move the puck out of their own zone. They defend way too much. And so, yeah, in a perfect world, you'd have somebody that's able to move the puck a little better than either one of those guys so that you're not spending as much time in your own end. But those players come at a cost. And again, it's where do you want to allocate the cap resources that you've got here? We know that this team needs scoring. It needs help up front. That still has to be, to me, the primary goal here of this week, moving through the draft and into free agency. And again, I just don't think that they've got the trade chips to make a massive trade for a score. So I think you are looking at free agency with all the smoke around Jake Guentzel. There's every reason to believe that the Canucks are going to swing for the fences there. But hey, Guentzel's going to have options. He's going to get his money wherever he goes. There's no absolutely certain lock that Jake Guentzel decides that Vancouver is where he wants to play. And I'm fascinated to see, guys, if Guentzel decides to pick somewhere other than Vancouver, what is plan B, and how does this management group execute that to, again, go and find an upgrade that can come in here and hit the ground running, scoring goals for the Vancouver Canucks next season?
Are you resigned to losing Dakota Joshua?
I think so, unless they can move off Mikheyev in the entirety of that contract. It's been remarkably quiet around Dakota Joshua. I know that there have been stories written, and I think they're kind of the ilk of, here's a guy that, Detroit should go after or Toronto should go after. Like, I'm not sure that we've heard a ton of absolute locks to other franchises, but I think we will here in the next week, because, used to have the speed dating period where teams could actually talk to players. That's not there anymore. But I think we'll start to, as the hockey world descends in Vegas, I think the rumor mill will churn once we get through the Stanley Cup final. I think the rumor mill will churn a little bit. But yeah, I think I am. I think that there's going to be one team out there, and that's all it takes, that, gets mesmerized by this big body that has soft hands, that can score and can also kill penalties. I mean, he's a useful piece, no question about it. But I do think that he's going to be a perfect case of overpayment on July 1st. And, that's where the Canucks have to be wary. And when Patrick Allvin signaled on that exit day about finding the next Dakota Joshua, I think I took him at face value. I think they recognized that they were able, through, a Group 6 channel, to find a player that was undervalued elsewhere, really hadn't hit yet. And they think that with their scouting, and their pro scouting's been really good here for the last couple of years. I think they feel that they can unearth that type of player. It may not be a carbon copy of Dakota Joshua, but yeah, quite frankly, I just think based on what he's going to be able to command, that there will be a team out there that thinks, he's worth whatever it is that he's going to get, but it's going to be too rich for the Vancouver Canucks.
Not just a value contract, though. You think it means physical, big guy, kills penalties, like that model, not just a value contract?
Yeah, and look, the Canucks aren't the biggest team in the world. And we know how much Rick Tocchet loves wall work and board battles. Like, it's going to be a blow if they lose Dakota Joshua. I mean, Rick Tocchet saw something in Joshua when he took over. He was able to get the best out of him down the stretch that first half season that he was behind the bench. And then last year, it absolutely would have been a 20-goal scorer if he hadn't broken his hand sticking up for Connor Garland in, a fight that turned out to be pointless against Chicago, of all teams, at the bottom of the barrel. But look, that's being a good teammate, and Joshua didn't think twice, stepped in that moment, and that'll gain him respect around the National Hockey League as it did within his own locker room. So, yeah, you're trying to replace all these pieces, but also one of the most physical forwards in the National Hockey League. Like, it's not going to be an easy replacement, and that's why I say, like, Dakota Joshua, like, good on him. He set himself up with the kind of season he had. This isn't a guy that's been cashing big paychecks since he was 20 years old. He was a late bloomer. So certainly not going to begrudge a guy that chases the bag here when the opportunity presents itself. But yeah, I just, the more I look at the Canucks situation, they can't afford to bring everybody back. And again, I'm not sure that they need to bring everybody back, because this is a team ultimately that fell short in the playoffs. So it's about trying to get better here. But I just think that Dakota Joshua is a piece that they've identified that they're not going to get into a bidding war over. I think they've made a pitch to him. He talked about how much he liked it here in Vancouver. And Jim Rutherford in that question and answer with Sportsnet last week basically said at some point it's on the players that, we've gone as far as we can, a little negotiating through the media, basically saying like, we're not going to budge off our position here, take it or leave it. And that's what this week is all about.
Hot take. Quinn Hughes not winning the Norris this week, better for the Vancouver Canucks, fuels a team-wide grudge all of next season. Thoughts?
I don't think you're going to get your wish, but
yeah, I'm fully expecting that he's going to be your Norris winner, so I would be surprised. But look, I'm all for a chip on the shoulder, whatever the reason is, whatever the explanation is. Why, if these guys need motivating, Rick Tocchet talked throughout the year about people just didn't give them a chance, and every time people doubted the Vancouver Canucks, all they did was win, and he wasn't wrong. And if they used that as some fuel, hey, so be it. So wherever they find their motivation. But as I sit here talking to you guys, I'm going to be surprised if Quinn Hughes isn't the Norris Trophy winner this year.
Rutherford mentioned IMAC last week that Besser is going to be an in-season thing next year. Do you think that's wise? And do you think there's a world where Besser and Guentzel can be Vancouver Canucks beyond next season?
I do think it's wise for a couple of reasons. One is, and it was unfortunate the way the season ended with the blood clot, but for a guy that's had injury issues, I think he needs to come back and show that this is behind him and that he can pick up where he left off. I think, it's always a little bit of a fool's game from the club side to be negotiating with guys off a career season that looks like it could be a little bit of an outlier for a guy that had never been to 30 to get to 40. And the other thing is, they always talk about cap flexibility. You can't just keep stacking massive deals one on top of the other. And there's, again, this management group trying to find some cap flexibility and some wriggle room. But this one's on them because we all thought at the time that Mikheyev was a little bit of a luxury that they probably didn't need and couldn't afford. But again, this is a team that couldn't kill penalties back then. I think they saw him as a guy that could come in here and help in that regard. The irony has been that he hasn't done a whole lot of penalty killing, really, or certainly hasn't been used as a primary penalty killer. So I just think a little bit of prudence here, and Besser's got to understand that, it's always a prove-it world. The danger and the downside, I guess, from the hockey club's perspective is if he comes back and picks up where he left off, he's going to be able to command an awful lot. Goal scorers get paid. He's going to be a 28-year-old in February heading to unrestricted free agency. I still think, though, there's a part of me that even though he got to 40 last year and led the Canucks with 7 in the playoffs, that there's a piece of this management group that isn't completely sold on Brock Besser as a long-term solution. So
he's at that price point now, right? So if he holds that, I don't know that he can make himself that much more money. After a 40 goal and a nice playoff, he's here. Meanwhile, in a twisted bit of logic here, I don't think they're hoping that he falls off, but maybe they hope he regresses just a smidge so that they can point to that as an outlier season and get him on a slightly more favorable deal. And hey, some of that playing time is going to be taken up by another acquisition, right? Whether it's Jake Guentzel or somebody else, there's going to be another person out there scoring goals, and you can't all score 3 goals in a game. So it's an interesting spot here for the Canucks that they are almost gambling that he has a 30-goal campaign, not a 40.
Right. The thing is, if he gets to 40 again, and we won't know that till the end of next season, but that would be 2 40-goal seasons. Well, guess what? Jake Guentzel has 2 40-goal seasons, and his, the numbers being thrown around are somewhere in the $9.5 million range. So if you can be a 2-time 40-goal scorer, I think you can command more certainly than Brock Besser. But you just think from the organization standpoint, they've come through a cycle here where a year ago they couldn't give him away, and it was a problematic contract. And so I think that they're hedging against rushing into anything here with this player right here, right now. Again, when I look at some pitfalls, though, if he has success, they need both Guentzel and Besser. Like, if this team is going to get better and truly be a contender, that's what they need. They need 2 legitimate snipers like those 2 guys. And so if Brock Besser comes back and has a ton of success, you can't trade him. If he's having a ton of success, pretty good chance that the team is having success. Can you move off that kind of player midseason if you're in win now mode and think that you're a contender? So it's complicated. It seems like it's always complicated around Brock, as much as we all like the person and sort of pull for, this guy coming through all the personal adversity that he has. It just always feels a little bit complicated around Brock Boeser, and I'm not sure that that's going to change as he moves into the final year of his contract.
Lastly, Jeff, on tonight's big game, is it the biggest in NHL history?
Yeah, I'm having trouble with that. I've seen that an awful lot. Maybe it's because there's been so much time between games that people are allowing their minds to wander and trying to build this up. It's Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. Like, I don't care who it is. The Canucks and the Bruins in 2011, the Blues and the Bruins a couple of years ago, Penguins and the Red Wings. Like, it doesn't get a whole lot better in this sport than Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. So, trying to pit one against the other, I get all the storylines here. The comeback has been impressive and incredible and almost unprecedented in, 75 years. McDavid and his legacy, Draisaitl to a lesser degree, and this whole Canadian thing. Like, there are some deep, deep storylines. I totally get that. But I keep coming back to the idea that venue matters. And South Florida isn't exactly the sexiest, iconic venue when we're talking about the greatest games. And really the matchup between Edmonton and Florida, through no faults of their own. Like, I look at 94, the Rangers, Game 7 win at Madison Square Garden with Messier and Richter and Leach and an original 6 team. And, I think those storylines are every bit as rich, if not richer, ending a 54-year drought as the Rangers did, unfortunately, at the expense of the Vancouver Canucks. So, look, biggest game in 3 decades? Sure. Like, I have no issues with that, just with all that's at stake. But I don't know. I have a little bit of trouble getting to the biggest game ever.
If you were not a Canucks reporter, would you cite that 94 game? Does that?
Yeah. I think venue matters. Look, if the Soviets beat Columbus on New Year's Eve in 1975, I don't think we'd look at that game the same way we do as, the Montreal Canadiens, the Montreal Forum. If the Anaheim Ducks had chased the Soviets out of their building on a Tuesday night, it was the Spectrum, it was the Broad Street Bullies, it was the like, that all matters. That's all the context that's part of the lore of these games. And so to me, Madison Square, just, it's one of the great stages in the sport. And what is it, Amarant? I'm not even sure what the is. Like, it's gone through so many. Like, hey, it's the biggest game in the history of the NHL. Where's it being played? I don't know. I can't remember the name of the rink.
Just sunrise on a map. Nah, I don't know.
Yeah. Anyways, we will all watch with interest. Jeff, thank you for the time, and big week ahead. We'll be calling on you.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Our next guest is a 4-time Grey Cup champion, was a fantastic British Columbia Lion, and even better Winnipeg Blue Bomber, and he is amongst the league CFL's all-time leading rushers, one of 6 people to eclipse 10,000 yards rushing. He's a filmmaker now.
Yeah.
And he's back in studio here with Sekeres Price visiting Vancouver. Andrew Harris, great to see you, buddy. How are you?
Too. Yeah, it's been a while, guys.
Yeah.
For sure.
First of all, they celebrated you in Winnipeg
on
Friday night. Tell us about your evening.
Yeah, it was nice. Like I said, I mean, being there as a spectator was pretty cool. I mean, Princess Auto Field is always rocking, and the fans are passionate there. And I did a little autograph signing, and the lineup of people that were waiting, and the ones that I couldn't even get to was just insane. So it's awesome to go through your career and see the impact you made on a community and fan base, and just get back to it, and now that the chapter's over for me, just be able to enjoy it more now as people just embrace you and all the great things you've done. And even my switch from leaving Winnipeg and it was kind of nasty split, as someone look at it, but I was so blessed to kind of bridge that gap and make amends and sign as a bomber, and and still have that same love and appreciation from the fans. So it was great.
How much does it kill you that the season was canceled there in 2020? That's still your heyday. You're coming off almost a 1,400-yard season with Winnipeg. Did you have another one of those in you when the pandemic hit?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. I mean, and a big part of a lot of this darkness that I kind of got to is during that COVID year. For a lot of other reasons, just personally too, right? So, yeah, I mean, it was tough for everyone, but I was early 30s there, and your shelf life as a running back is already short. But when you're in your prime and you're doing well, and I was kind of hitting my stride there, and yeah, it definitely sucked to lose a year there right when I was really crushing it. So
the question that everybody wants to ask: what's inside the blood? Is it blue and gold? Is it orange? What color is that blood?
I mean, it's blue and gold for sure. But I mean, and only for the reasons of I grew up watching the Bombers. That was the team I dreamed of playing for. I think the biggest impact I had on the field, it was there. And it's my hometown, but I had Wally out to the VI Raiders. We had a golf tournament on the weekend, and we did a little hot stove where just asking questions and talking, and I had dinner with them, and so I mean the BC Lions gave me an opportunity, and I would never be here. I wouldn't have had this career if I wouldn't have had that opportunity, and now just trying to give that same opportunity to the other young kids, and going to university is not for everyone. It wasn't for me, and junior football was that outlet to kind of get me to get to the CFL.
They go from you to Brady Oliveira. They just get to cheer on Winnipeg guys the whole time. What's with that?
Yeah, well, they and it's funny, you need Nick Dembski too. We're all like 5 years apart and went to the same high school, so
wow,
pretty special.
You didn't go to that high school,
No.
when you were in Winnipeg.
High school,
you went to the non-athlete high school, I guess.
I didn't go to high school there. I was I was en route for Churchill. What was Churchill's football program like?
Oh yeah, they beat us when I was in grade 11. Yeah. So they were decent. I don't know how they are now though.
Well, he says Brady, but you opened up a lot of opportunity for Canadian tailbacks, Andrew. That much is clear. I mean, how does?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look back in 2010 or 11. I mean, we had myself, Jamal Lee, who was I think he still has a record for most yards in the youth sports. Joe Messam, who went on to win MOC and have a couple pretty good years. But there was three of us, and then John Cornish, and so there was a bit of a trend that started, and I thought myself and John for sure really ran it and took with ran it and ran away with it. And I think just giving the opportunity, that's the biggest thing, and you're seeing it a bit with quarterbacks, and but yeah, there was never really there's a couple guys here and there as Canadian running backs, and but it's just
often it was guys with size, like rarely do you like the Millingtons, but the guys with skill, the guys that could cut back on you and make you look silly. Though we didn't have a ton of those before you guys.
Well, that was the biggest thing for me is being more than just a guy who could carry the ball. Blocking well is taking the pride in being one of the best blockers in the league, and then catching the ball at the backfield, and being an extension of the pass game and an outlet. I came into the team as a running back, and they tried to put me at receiver and safety, and kind of joking with Wally. I'm like, well, we just saw you as a football player, and we were trying to find a way to get in the field. I'm like, yeah, but I've never backpedaled in my life, and now I want to do it at the professional level. So, but yeah, funny, but it's amazing to see teams give guys opportunities, and and what they do with that. So it's great.
Well, I know you're a Winnipeg guy and had your best years with the Bombers, but I'd also like to credit Hattie Abassi and the VI Raiders in our province with some of your football development. As you mentioned, university wasn't for you. CJFL was your route. You were a record setter out here, and now you're working for Hattie. Catch us up in life here.
Yeah, so I'm head of football operations for the junior team still. Hattie's kind of stepped away now, and so I mean it's been tough out there. We've been 0-10 for the last 2 years, so really just focusing on sponsorships, getting the community back involved, recruiting, and trying to round out our coaching staff to give these guys the best coaching as possible. But yeah, so that's kind of my side project, and then working for Hattie Atlas Engineer Products out in London. There we have 8 plants across Canada and 3 in London. So I was kind of had my hand in that kind of part-time while I was still playing. So it's been a really smooth transition, and I'm really enjoying it.
What have you made of this Lions Bombers rivalry over the last few years? There's been some terrific games.
Yeah, I mean, I think just just seeing what where the Lions have come, and especially with the new ownership, and seeing guys like RP and bringing a different kind of energy and life to the team. And I mean, the Bombers have been kind of the standard for the last 5 years, right? And obviously they're going through some tough times now, but it's so hard to stay on top, and you got to bring in fresh blood, and you got to keep things interesting, and keep challenging people, and making sure no one's getting comfortable, right? You got to let a fire under ass every day, and and find different ways to motivate guys. So the Bombers simply are just getting older. You look at their their O-line, and a lot of the key players are just and take it from me, I thought I could play forever, and it slides so fast. In my early 30s, and everyone's that's one of the reasons why the Lions let me go, because I was just about to be 30, and you kind of just hit this prime, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's like, wow.
How's your day-to-day health? How are your knees?
Yeah, I still have a banged up knee, but I'm playing hockey still. I'm actually
good for you.
I'm playing senior A next year for the Tilsonburg Thunder.
Nice.
So yeah,
going for an Allen Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I don't golf. I got to keep the competitive juices going. So I mean, it's I got to do something. And yeah, so that's I'm excited. I've been playing so much beer league though. I'm just gotta get that head up, and so I'll probably get lit up a couple of times, but then after that, watch out.
Hey, you mentioned you're released by the Lions, and as we know, Wally usually got out of a player a year early rather than a year later. I'm pleased to hear you guys were connected on the weekend. When they did let you go, are you mad, bro? Like, did you want to be here? Did you want to stay here? Did you think?
Honestly, no. I
they
mean,
gave up on you.
You ended up in a good spot.
You wound up having some terrific seasons. It might have been one of Wally's biggest mistakes letting you go when he did.
Yeah, I mean, I think even in that 15 season, it was we had a new coaching staff, and we had Tedford in here, and everything was just kind of, it wasn't sitting right with me. I wasn't really wasn't in really a good spot. And then I mean, honestly, the Winnipeg just the contract offer they gave me was no one was going to match that. And it was home, and so I don't even if it's as good as I wanted to or could have felt here, I think going back home was
the right move.
Yeah.
Well, you chronicle that and more in Running Back Relentless, the new Andrew Harris documentary. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys remember Team Shaw back when I think 2011-12 they were kind of working with the CFL, and so I worked with one of the guys who's doing all the video for that, and we got to know each other, and have some drinks and tell stories, and so we got to know each other a bit more, and we ended up doing a short little film with TSN in 2018 called I Shouldn't Be Here, and that was just kind of a blimp, just a sample size of what was going on in my life. And then after 19 happened, like there's so much happened, success, COVID, and then a lot of personal things, right? So he approached me, and he said, we really got to do something with this, and do this our way, so we found got Justin Dunk on as a executive producer, and got some other sponsorship, and put everything together. And yeah, it was definitely tough to go through the process, very vulnerable, and I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this the right way. I'm going to go all in. And I think when you're in the public eye and you're an athlete, and you're just, everyone just sees what you're doing on the field, and they might get a little bit of knowledge of what's kind of happening behind the scenes, but there's a lot of stuff as athletes like we go through that we don't really expose or relate to people, and it affects our play. It affects our day-to-day, and we got to come in to the locker room and just kind of flush it, and no matter how you're playing or what's going on, you just got to bury it and keep going. And for me, the personal stuff was weighing, and the trauma from my childhood, and I just kind of got to this point where I was at a breaking point and in a really, really dark place. And this is right after I just won MVP and brought Winnipeg, got Winnipeg a Grey Cup, and so everyone around me was like, oh yeah, I'm on top of the world, but deep down inside I was like, I was in a hole. And then boom, COVID hits. So yeah, lots of hardship there, and struggle, and and again, it's a story about a football player, but it's not a football documentary, you know. So I think it's really going to help a lot of people, and I think it'll be relatable to a lot of folks, and I think it'll hopefully and I already know it's helped people and people I've seen at the premiere and the viewing in Toronto, and it's been out now since Thursday, and I've had multiple people reach out, so I think it'll be impactful, and and that's all. I want to just keep impacting people and making a difference.
How you doing today?
I'm great. I mean, yeah, it's this has been very therapeutic, letting things out, flushing things, and just accepting what it is, and even this film, going through it, you're going through the editing process, and you're how can we critique this, and how can we change this, which we add, which we take away. We only had 86 minutes to kind of fit in a lot of my life, and there's a lot of stuff we didn't get in there, but I finally got to a place where it's like, this is this is the story, this is what it is, and accepting that, and accepting all the things I've been through, and the relationships and the successes and the downfall, and you have a greater appreciation for the people you impacted and the things you did, and yeah, I'm in a great place.
Are locker rooms in a better place now to deal with this sort of thing, do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, even from a sports psychology piece and having that awareness, there's one side to visualization and how to deal with understanding to get the most out of it. I mean, 90% of the game is mental. I don't think, honestly, it is. And your mental state, whether you're worried about your job getting taken or a contract or whatever it is, or even if you're just thinking about an injury or it affects your game so much. So there's that side of it, but then there's all these stories and all these different walks of life that are all in this room, and you're 70 guys on a roster, and everyone's football is very unique that way. There's so many guys, and everyone's so much more. You go in a hockey locker room, all those guys are pretty similar. Basketball, football is it's a
big swap.
Yeah, it's nuts,
especially a CFL room, right?
Yeah.
American, Canadian,
Exactly.
religious, non-religious,
Yeah.
white, black, highly
Yeah.
paid, low paid. I mean, there's
all the
so many
international
divides.
players. Yeah. So I mean, but I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, and I think the big thing for me, the narrative I'm trying to push is that as male athletes, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to talk about emotions, and I've never been one to do that. But I also saw how dangerous it was when I said you get to that breaking point where it's like, man, like I was at a point where I was really like I wanted to hurt myself and not wake up the next day, and and I especially with family, I'm like, man, like I can't believe I let myself get to that point. So but I know there's lots of guys that have been there, and but I think again, just trying to push that narrative of talking to someone, letting it out, and trusting people, and that was a big part for me, is not trusting people enough to kind of let it out. So
good for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Where can they see the documentary?
Yeah, it's out on Apple TV, Google Play, and Amazon Prime. Yeah,
2 kids, third on the way.
Yeah.
It's great to see you again, my man.
Yeah, great
really
to see you guys
appreciate
too.
you making time here.
Thank you
for this, Andrew.
Thanks.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the net. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
For the Golf Report, brought to you by the Arnold Palmer designed Whistler Golf Club. Off to an incredible start for the 2024 season. Amazing reviews on course condition and service. We remind group organizers of 12 or more, it is not too early to get your September and October buddy trips, corporate trips booked. Primetime's filling up fast. You, the group organizer, of course, plays for free. Tell us about your group at whistlergolf.com/groups. Well, a big day for the Canadians at the Travelers Championship, a bigger day for Scotty Scheffler.
He's inevitable. He's just inevitable.
He is becoming Tiger Woods in that regard. They were saying on the golf broadcast yesterday, when you're playing in his orbit, you can't afford mistakes because that just takes you out of the golf tournament, as Tony Finau and Tom Kim and others learned yesterday. 4 Canadians in the top 27. This is an elevated event on the PGA Tour. Surrey's Adam Svensson led the way. 63 Saturday for Svensson. Took him to -14 and a tie for 16th, but Scheffler defeats Tom Kim in a playoff. Now up to 6 wins and $27.7 million in earnings this year.
Feel a little bit bad for Tom Kim because after going 62, 65, 65, he was in pretty good shape to win this tournament.
62, 65, 65 wins you many tournaments.
Yes.
Just not ones where Scotty Scheffler is involved shooting proximal scores. Jim Nantz said it as they were late in the day that whatever margin of strokes that he's going to get for the Tour Championship in Atlanta is just not enough. Like, they should amend the rules and just give him an 8 to 10 stroke advantage because he's earned it with his play this year. 6 wins and 10 starts. The tournament was also interrupted on the 72nd green by climate protesters who stormed the green, coordinated, threw painted substances on the green. And one of them later said, well, golfers, because they require good weather and conditions to play, should know better than most the effects of climate change and extreme weather. But there was a discussion, where do we play the playoffs? And it turned out they got the 18th hole and the green in order.
Cameron Young shoots 59 on Saturday,
Right.
joins that pantheon of golfers. He finished 66, 59, 66. That also should usually
Wins you a golf tournament.
but he opened with a 72. So he has to look back on Thursday and go, if I was just a little bit better on Thursday,
Yeah.
I'm in that playoff as well.
And Amy Yang, a big winner on the LPGA side, finally got a major. We also know, based on the result, Sahali is just a magnificent looking golf course.
Yeah.
People tell me that won't work for the PGA Tour players anymore. Okay, I'll take your word for it, but I absolutely love the look, the aesthetic of that golf course, where you have these itty bitty holes carved out of like the massive old growth forest. I mean, it's got like an amphitheater arena feel to it, like the competitors are almost like in the cage, so to speak, this green cage.
It's like Shaughnessy on steroids a little bit, like it's got some metal. It's just great West Coast golf.
It really is.
Fabulous.
I would love to see, I'm glad to see the LPGA has gone back there because, of course, that's where Brooke Henderson won her first major on the LPGA Tour. And speaking of Brooke, her and Alina Sharp will represent Canada at the Olympics. It is the third time for both of them. They have been head and shoulders the two best Canadian players on the women's side of things for now a third Olympiad. Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.